lions are amazing animals. They're mammals like we are, and I think that's one of the beauties, is that we can often see ourselves reflected in these animals, but they're also part of this amazing ocean environment that draws that curiosity from us. They live such complex lives because they're wild animals and they're surviving in that environment. They have responsibilities and roles in terms of their reproduction, and they do such amazing things because they're adapted to that environment. So they're diving depths that we can only dream of diving, and they're traveling distances that are just absolutely amazing. My name is Chandra Salgado Kent, and I'm Associate Professor at Edith Cowan University. Australian sea lions forage on the sea floor, and they'll go as far out as the continental shelf, traveling hundreds of kilometers for some individuals. The younger ones might stay a little bit closer to home, but these other animals will go very far and dive deep. So they're functioning at their energetic maximum. They're also unique in many ways that actually make them highly vulnerable. They have this really odd 17 to 18 month reproductive cycle, so this is quite unusual. And because of this, they're actually very slow reproducers. These animals also occur on islands that are quite remote, and so their breeding colonies might be quite small and very distant. And what this means is there's quite limited genetic exchange, which makes them more vulnerable to extinction. One of the unique features of Australian sea lions is that they're endemic to Australia. What this means is that they only occur in Australian waters. And it's not all around Australia. It's in fact only South Australia and Western Australia. There are many in Western Australia that hold quite small breeding colonies, but also you have haul-out areas where these animals will go out and they'll rest. And depending on the time in the breeding cycle, they may be displaying very different behaviors. And in some locations, it might only be the males that are actually using those islands, whereas others, it's a combination of different age classes and sex classes. And so on the south coast of Western Australia, in fact, we do see a lot of those breeding islands, which is really important. Australian sea lions use the haul-out areas and their breeding colonies as core habitat, but of course there's all of the areas that they use out in the ocean. So they spend 50% on land and 50% in the water. And in the water, they actually forage long distances, and they range and vary in terms of their core foraging areas. And so this is one of the aims of trying to conduct research and understand what is the critical habitat for these animals, which includes, again, their haul-out and breeding colonies, plus the foraging areas. The population size of Australian sea lions is currently roughly around 12,000 to 14,000, and we don't have the exact number. However, we do have an idea from all of the fantastic work of so many people that go out and research the animals and do counts, and managers who are on ground, marine rangers that are looking to help inform us so that we can effectively conserve and manage these animals. And so one of the things that we do know is that the majority of that population is off South Australia. We've got a smaller proportion of the population, which is between around 15 and 30% in Western Australia. And of those distributed in Western Australia, the majority of the breeding colonies are actually on the south coast. So it's only a fraction of what it used to be. This is because of commercial harvesting that occurred in the 1800s, 1700s and 1800s. This species, as a result, the population has seriously declined, and it's not bounced back. Due to the decline in Australian sea lion numbers and the evidence that shows that in fact we're on a downward trend, these animals have been listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, What that means is they're at a high risk of extinction. So this is quite a concern. And the Australian National Government has taken the evidence and the information, and they've also listed them as endangered. While we're no longer harvesting Australian sea lions, they do still face a range of threats. Some of these are direct, so they're things that we can see. For example, vessel strikes. Others, for example, are entanglements with marine debris, so plastics that make it to the ocean, or fishing line entanglements, or bycatch from fisheries. There are a range of other threats as well. Of course, climate change is a huge one. One of the things that we often forget is we're looking at how are we going to manage one particular threat. The reality is it's all of the different threats that combine, and so we have this particular situation where if we've got climate change layered over perhaps some of our activities, layered over perhaps entanglement and disease, then we have a major risk with Australian sea lions. The Australian National Recovery Plan has an objective of halting the decline in Australian sea lions as well as assisting the recovery in Australian sea lions. So anything that we can be doing to change this downward trend to an upward trend is exactly what we need to do. And thinking about these marine parks, designing them, and being able to integrate sanctuary zones in those areas will help us achieve those objectives.